All right. So welcome back to the Contrarians. We've got a fun panel discussion here for you today. We're going to be talking about Miles Davis. So we're going to go around and each of our panelists is going to give their top three albums. And then we will hopefully either do some honorable mentions or maybe a nice open panel discussion. We'll see what happens. We'll keep it loose. We'll keep it improvisational, you might say.
Hey.
There's my pun for today.
Jazzy.
So if you like Contrarians, if you like these sort of chats, please join the discussion in the comments below. We'd love to hear what your top three albums are, or your top 30 even. With Miles Davis, you got a lot to choose from. So we have a Patreon. If you want to support the channel, you can join the Patreon, and any tier will get you access to the discussions. There's a Ko-fi, there's a TeePublic, but most important thing is just if you like the discussion, you want to keep it going, please like and subscribe. Please share with your friends. Enough of all that stuff. We're going to dive right in. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves when they start, and maybe let the people know where they can find you online. And so without further ado, it's enough for me. Let's start with Ryan. Give us your top three Miles Davis albums.
So we're doing our number three now, and we'll all go around number two, or are we doing it?
We'll do all three in one go, and hopefully we'll have time for discussion at the end. So
all right, great. So first of all, I'm Ryan Gavalier. You can find me at the channel Ryan's Vinyl Destination. Also Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at the same name. I've been a Miles Davis fan for years now. He's one of my favorite jazz musicians. And there's a lot of different eras of his music. So it was like, where am I going to pick from? I did a little bit of a mix. All my albums are from the 50s through the 70s. One modal album, one kind of modal, kind of right at the end of the hard bop era, and then one fusion record. So for my number three, I'm gonna go with the obvious one. I'm gonna go with Kind of Blue. This has to be on any list of essential Miles Davis. It's a masterpiece. Right from the beginning notes of So What, you just know you're in for a magical album. For the most part, this one's pretty mellow. It's one of the best recorded albums in jazz, which is amazing because it's from 57 and it sounds like it could have been recorded yesterday. It's so clear. All the instruments sound amazing, and it just has such a great atmosphere to it. You have a lot of great tracks on here, like So What, Blue and Green, Flamenco Sketches, which is one of my favorites on here, and All Blues, just a lot of great stuff. And this is also just such an iconic lineup. This is literally like, you look at, all these mashups of a bunch of movie characters or like a bunch of famous actors and stuff, like that one movie that came out like 10 years ago, The Expendables, that had like all the big action stars. Well, this is actually like a good ensemble cast. You've got Cannonball Adderley, Paul Chambers, James Cobb, John Coltrane on a Miles Davis album, Bill Evans, and Wynton Kelly. So you just have like a lot of the biggest names of jazz on here. It's truly an ensemble cast. It just sounds perfect, and you can really tell that Miles is going to leave a big impact on jazz. He had been out for a little while at this point, but this is kind of like the big breakthrough record almost. So my number two, I'm going to go with Nefertiti from 1968. Another beautiful record. This one just feels warm, and it's interesting because this is right as his hard bop era with the quintet was ending, right before he went into his fusion era. So this is like an interesting little transition record, although honestly it feels very much like a traditional Miles album. It's not a transition in the sense where you could tell two different eras. It actually feels like a little bit of a step back from what he had been doing in the mid 60s, but it's just such a beautiful album. It's kind of modal again. You have a good swing to it, at times a little bit of hard bop, especially on a track like Riot, which is a bit more up tempo. But just a really gorgeous record and also really well recorded. And for my number one, I'm gonna go with On the Corner from 1972. So this is this is him going full in with fusion, because before this we had Bitches Brew and Jack Johnson, which are both amazing albums, but this one's 10 steps forward in experimentalism as those ones were. You've got crazy funk, you've got a lot of interesting beats on this. I mean, this album is actually very influential, like hip hop and stuff and funk music, just because of how cutting edge the beats on it were. The opening track is just killer. I mean, it's just like so bombastic. All the instruments are on the top of their game. You got John McLaughlin on here killing it on this album. You got other big time artists like who else do you have on here? I think Herbie Hancock, Jack DeJohnette, I think is on this one. Amongst a bunch of other ones. This one has, just like Bitches Brew, this has so many great musicians on it. I think Chick Corea is on this, etc. But just another masterpiece of an album. I've also always really loved this album cover because it just feels like a Fat Albert cartoon to me. It's just got so much character to it. So much character to it. When you got the purple on the back, so just a really cool artwork in general. We kind of see artwork this again on the compilation Water Babies, which would come out in '76, kind of similar artwork. But yeah, just a really cutting edge album. It's some of the most experimental we ever hear from Miles Davis, and it's always just been an album that's really blown me away and inspired me as a listener and as a musician as well. So that's my top three.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. Great picks as always. Let's move on. We'll keep it going. Rand, you're up next.
Okay. Well, I was going to say the first time I ever listened to Miles Davis in the context that I'm going to go into was when I was in the Air Force. I had two roommates that had this album, and they played it for me, and I did not know who John McLaughlin was, but when I had got done with this, and also they played me Bitches Brew, I was like, holy crap, I love that guitar player. And then when Mahavishnu Orchestra came up in 1971, about that same time after that, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest stuff ever. I just love it. Yeah, this Live Evil is what this is called. And I got the double CD, which has the pretty much, I think the original LP was just one record, if I'm not mistaken. But man, this stuff is so good. I think trying to find my favorite tracks on here is kind of like crazy, but What I Say is John McLaughlin just going absolutely berserk. Like they must have looked at him and go, where did you get that guy? He's like the only British musician in the band, right? Everybody else is American. Just, I love it. And then this one at the end called Emirata is really awesome, and Funky Tonk. But yeah, Live Evil is my number 3. And my number 2, well, this is tough because, again, we're going to go with John McLaughlin, but I think my number 2 is going to be a tribute to Jack Johnson. This is just freaking phenomenal studio recording here. We have 2 tunes, Right Off and Yesternow. And I just love this cover in the back with them sitting in this old time car. Anybody know what kind of car that is?
It's an Oldsmobile.
Is it really?
I don't know. I just used the word.
It's got the eagle on the hood ornament. I'm thinking it's a Duesenberg or something like that, but I could be wrong. And yeah, this is great. This is Jack Johnson was a boxer, I should say, who was treated very unfairly by the legal system. And Miles Davis wrote this album for him. And then I think my number one is going to be this dude here.
Oh,
This album is insane. I always
Yep.
say to people, if you compare Miles Davis to Yes, this would be his relayer.
Except it's better than Real Air.
Well, I'm just talking about energy level.
Okay.
This album is it's crazy. And it's not even McLaughlin. Some guy named Pete Cozy who's just playing his ass off. And I never heard of the guy. But this whole thing is like one suite on 2 discs. It has Moja and Willie, and then Tattoo and 9. And it's about 120 minutes of just pure brilliance.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable. And yeah, I can't say enough. Dark Magus, my absolute favorite.
That's brilliant.
It is. That's a hard one to come by in America too.
It is.
I think it was released only in Japan until I want to say the 90s.
Well, I guess
So
there
it
was a
doesn't-
reissue, Columbia Legacy. This is
Yeah.
says Miles' 75th anniversary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got it on Amazon.com. I
Me
just
too.
freaking love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rand.
You're
And I think looking at the pace
Oh,
we're
I
going,
forgot to
we're-
tell you, I do have a YouTube channel called Rand Anthony Kelly, and I do these projects every once in a while called One Rand Band, where I turn all my synthesizers on with robotic sequencers and stuff, and then try to jam with them on my guitar, or my Mellotron, or my Mini Moog. I have a lot of fun. There's a lot of those videos up there if anybody wants to watch them.
Well, awesome. Go
Nobody
check it out,
does.
everyone. Go check them out. Go check them out. Well, thanks again, Rand. And at the pace we're going, looks like we're going to have time for those honorable mentions and maybe a fun discussion. So this is great. David, you are next.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll do the plug-in. First of all, Davy's Cinema Flicks Music Picks, as it suggests, movies and music. Just did one today on, there was a Hammer horror, there was a bullfighting movie, and there was a 70s Hollywood New Wave movie. So head over there if you want absolute nonsense. Stay here for good stuff, though. Or head to Ryan's. There's a nice plug for you. There you go. It's not all good, though. I'm on there sometimes. The journey for me and Miles, we're on first name terms. Me and Miles was a difficult one at first because I jumped in way too far too fast. I jumped in right and went, whoa, what's that? Whoa. Steady on now, son. Steady on. Hold the jets. What's going on? And I was naive. God, I could only have been about 14, 15. And it put me off for the longest time. And then it was probably in my 20s, early 20s. My jazz guru, Mr. Dave Coffin, a good friend of mine, kept saying to me, you need to get more into jazz, because he knew I was into jazz fusion. And he started recommending gateway drugs. So it would give me the heaviest fusion and stuff, and then slowly in his next recommendation take away a little bit of the distortion, a little bit of the bass, and eventually I'm in hard bop without realizing it. So shout out to Dave there. So with that in mind, I will go with my number 3 as being a bit of a sentimental choice, because it's one that's very reminiscent of the kind of records that we used to be bombarded with in my grandparents' house, the Great American Songbook stuff. It's Miles' second collaboration with Gail Evans, Porgy and Bess, which unusually for Miles is much more of a tune-based record, certainly going forwards. I mean, there's 13 tracks. Obviously, it's based on the classic George Gershwin, Ira Gershwin, the Gershwin brothers piece, 1958. So it's I think 6 months before Kind of Blue. I think it was about 6 months it was released before it. And it is, you can see all the directions it's about to go, but Miles is still pushing, he's still trying to discover, he's in the process of becoming, to use that overused term. But Gil took away all the chords and just gave him the orchestration and told him to go wild with it. And to me, Gil and Miles are one of the great collaborations of the 20th century in terms of music. It's just a perfect match, a match made in heaven. So you get these familiar tracks. I mean, how many versions of Summertime do we need, really? But Miles still finds a way to make it fresh. And that goes with other tracks. Best Use My Woman Now, I Loves You Porgy, It Ain't Necessarily So. Again, in my grandparents' house, the Gershwins were on all the time, so it's hard for me to hear an instrumental version of these without singing the words in my head. And then Miles is doing the exact words on the trumpet himself. And again, it's got some classic. It's got the classic lineup on here. Cannonball's credited here still as Julian Adderley, which I kind of love. You can see why you change your name to Cannonball if you're a kid, though, wouldn't you? That's pretty awesome. So yeah, Julian Adderley. So that's my number 3 pick, Porgy and Bess. My number 2 pick, I wasn't going to pick because it again goes back to Gil Evans, and I thought it's not very diverse, but then I thought, yeah, it kind of comes at it from the opposite end of the spectrum, literally. It's the very end of his career, and it's live album, Miles and Quincy, live at Montreux, which is just before, I think a year and a half before Miles passed away. And he was never one for the nostalgia circuit, did not like doing the old stuff. Hated, the idea of being a legacy act. The idea that he's now on something called Columbia Legacy would have appalled him. But he's here being convinced by Quincy and by Claude Nobbs to do a tribute to his work with Gil Evans. So you get here actually a few tracks from Porgy and Bess, but you get a good chunk of Miles Ahead, which is, it's a good way to just incorporate some stuff from Miles Ahead in here as well. So you get a whole suite of Miles Ahead. And then you get 3 tracks from Sketches of Spain at the end as well, which is just, again, fantastic, legendary album. One of those, I think it's maybe my most beautifully subdued Miles album, Sketches of Spain. I adore that record. But the reason that I go for this is Miles is older, he's frail, he is on the way out. But you've got 2 orchestras here. You've got Quincy Jones and you've got the Gil Evans Legacy Orchestra. And he rises to the occasion. And sometimes he isn't as powerful as he was. And that gives it a vulnerability that you don't associate with Miles Davis. And in that regard, it's kind of like, to be overused and used a kind of cliched comparison, it's almost like his version of something like Johnny Cash's American series, where you can see the great artist suddenly in a decline, but still trying to make an artistic statement. And for him to do a return to his early days and to do the greatest hits, if you can call these hits in the traditional sense, but for him to do that, it's just remarkable to hear. And for every note that, doesn't sound exactly as strong as it did on Miles Ahead or Sketches of Spain, it still sounds beautiful for what it is. So yeah, Miles and Quincy live at Montreux, 1991. But anybody that knows me and knows where I started really getting into Miles will not be surprised to know that my number 1 with a bullet is a tribute to Jack Johnson. This is just, it will and forever always will be my favorite Miles record. There's a nice bigger version of your car there, Ryan. That's what you can be driving about town in, your hair flying in the wind, son. But it's a terrific jazz record. But is it? Because it's also one of the best rock records ever made. Miles had that famous quote that if he wanted at any time, he could put together the best rock band on earth. He did. This is it. They're sitting right here. So, I mean, yeah, we've already gushed over John McLaughlin, Herbie Hancock, Steve Grossman, Billy Cobham, of course, is on this, still credited as Bill Cobham on here. But then there's loads, Miko Henderson, of course, can't forget him on Fender bass. There's loads of other players who are on here who aren't credited because it was done from a few different sessions, and as with a lot of this era, kind of stitched together in the studio. So Sonny Sharrock's on here, who I recently talked about elsewhere on, who made one of the best albums of the 90s, Sonny Sharrock's Ask the Ages, which is just the most insane guitar album. If you like jazz fusion guitar, you need to hear Sonny Sharrock's Ask the Ages. This is 10 out of 10. But you get 2 tracks, as Rand said, only. So Right Off is side 1, and Yesternow is side 2. Right Off is just totally in your face. It just sounds like an absolute rocker. If you take off Miles, which obviously wouldn't do in a Miles record, you would think it was just a straightforward rock album. There's nothing on here that particularly says jazz is more rock than it is anything else. And again, it goes back to the concept of, as Rand said, he's channeling the anger at the treatment of Jack Johnson. So it is a concept album instrumentally, apart from a little bit at the end where Brock Peters, the late great Brock Peters from To Kill a Mockingbird, does a tiny snippet of Jack talking. But then Yesternow on side B is, that is one of the greatest tracks I think Miles ever recorded. I mean, it's funk, it's it is jazz obviously, but it's soul, it's moody, it's groovy. He throws in little tidbits of In a Silent Way, just to kind of reference his own back catalogue. It's playful stuff. A lot of it, again, was just improv in the studio. Famously, he walked in and McLaughlin and co were just jamming, and he just joined in 2.5 minutes. And that's why Miles isn't on the first 2.5 minutes. So it really is just an essential album that wasn't written, it just became. And to me, that just sums up Miles Davis. It's not something that could have been planned. It's something that had to happen, came from the ether. So my number 1 with the bullet. Miles Davis, a tribute to Jack Johnson. I absolutely adore it. So thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. Very eloquent top 3 there. So thanks, Davey. All right, we're gonna go keep it right moving along with John the Music Nut. You're up next.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. What I decided to do with mine today is I'm gonna go with 3 different eras for Miles. My first one, we'll say this is my number 3 today. This was recorded in 1956, was released in 1958. And what they did between May and October of 56, this was his first quintet, was they cut 4 albums and they put them out at different times. And they had one called Cookin', one called Walkin', one called Steamin', and one called Relaxin' with the Miles Davis Quintet. This is his first quintet. On here he has, I grabbed the wrong notes. Okay, John Coltrane here on tenor saxophone, Red Garland on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, Philly Joe Jones on drums. Miles Davis made several albums with, John Coltrane made several albums with the Miles Davis first quintet back in the 50s, and before he wrenched down his own, and he shines like the sun on here. This album's called Relaxin'. It's, the title says it all. It's music for an intimate night in, and everything's very good on here. Some of them are songs that are like from musicals, but they made them their own way. If I Were a Bell, I believe, was originally from Guys and Dolls. That's got a wonderful melody that you remember from the first time you hear it, and it's excellent. You're My Everything is a lot more somber. Miles and John solos on that are very good. I Could Write a Book is very rhythmic. The rhythm section really carries that one. Polio is a Sonny Rollins tune. That's probably the best song, my favorite song on the album. And that song's very good. It Could Happen to You has some excellent piano leads in it. Awesome track. And Woody and You, that I believe is a Dizzy Gillespie song. That's a very strong closer and has a lot of great memorable horn lines on it as well. Now, my number 2, now we're going to go with the second great Miles Davis quintet. you can argue this may have been the best group of musicians ever assembled, and you couldn't really argue it too. I mean, you might come up with some others, but it's hard to beat the second quintet. It's hard to beat Miles, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Wayne Shorter, and a young, wonderful Tony Williams on drums. And this was their second album with the great quintet. And you already know where I'm going. This is Miles Smiles.
Yeah.
Miles, fantastic album. I've loved it. I got into Miles's music about 20 years ago. I was taking classical piano lessons, and I wanted to get into jazz. And my piano teacher said, she pointed away from me. She said, listen to WRTI out of Philadelphia, Temple's radio station. They play classical during the day and they play jazz at night. And Friday nights there were just a revelation for me. They still are. But this is, and get a little off track, but you heard a lot of the second quintet on here. Yeah, there you go. Oh yeah. Miles with a guitar. But Miles Smiles is wonderful. Here, this is the hard bop. So they took that bop sound and they revolutionized the music, got faster and got a lot more adventurous. And it's so exciting, even to this day. This came out, I believe this was 1967, maybe 66. But and Wayne Shorter is the highlight as far as a writer here. He wrote 3 songs on here, which are standards in jazz music today. Orbits is the first track. That's his. That just comes right at you like a locomotive. It's an excellent track. Circle is a Miles track. That's a ballad. That's very somber, and it works very, very well. Footprints has been recorded by so many different jazz artists. Excellent track. Dolores, this horn line is probably the best horn line that the second great quintet ever did. I mean, it's just amazing. This whole album, a young 19-year-old, 20-year-old Tony Williams rewrote jazz drumming. He is a monster on all of these tracks. Freedom Jazz Dance is his showcase. He is insane on this. I can listen to this track and still get excited to this day. Wonderful. Gingerbread Boy, the fantastic closer. Everything on here is stunning. Miles Smiles. It's my number 2. My number 1, this is more fusion. And to me, this is, in a way, it's kind of Miles Davis's White Album. It's a Sandinista. It's his Blonde on Blonde. It's Get Up With It from 1974. Now, this was the last recorded music he would do before he took a hiatus. And this album, it's a 2-discer. It's superb. Mm-hmm. Who can make 2 tracks over 30 minutes long each? And they just suck you in. And you are just listening the whole time. You're never bored. He Loved Her Madly was a dedication to, he wrote this for Duke Ellington, Miles did. When he would end his shows, he would say, I love you madly. That's what Duke Ellington would end his shows with. So, actually, it's He Loved Him Madly. I'm sorry. He loved him madly. But this is an exercise in restraint. It's 33 minutes. You have all these musicians on here. One thing I got to note from here, and starting with probably In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew, he would always stay in his lane as far as what musicians he was going to have. But by In a Silent Way, Miles broke all the rules. He put whoever he wanted on each track. There you go. There you go. And from here, there's so many different musicians on here. The music was recorded, I believe. A lot of it was outtakes. I believe there's stuff on here that was supposed to be on the corner. But He Loved Him Madly is amazing. It sounds like something you hear in a museum. Maisha it's a lot more somber. led by its organ line, and it gets really crazy at the end, and it's really cool. Honky Tonk and Rated X are insane. I mean, they're very, particularly Rated X is it has this incredible harmonic groove on it that works so well. This is like crazy jungle funk a lot of the time. Especially disc 2, Calypso Free Limo, insane. It's jungle funk, goes completely quiet, and then has this slow burn until it gets back into its original theme. Some of the solos on here are sick. Red China Blues is the next track. That's like the only track he plays it straight. It's just a blues song. But the horns are carrying it. M2Me, more crazy jungle funk, fantastic. A lot of these songs are long, but they just take you in. They don't feel long to me. And Billy Preston, a shout out to the great R&B piano player, who had some great songs on his own. It's a killer closer. Get up with it, 1974. It is my number one. I think with Miles though, your album, I mean, he's got so much straight stuff. Your top 3 could change any day. My top 3, so that's my number 1. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. All right, Bill, last but not least, you're up.
All right. Bear with me, gentlemen. I'm feeling a little under the weather, got a little bit of brain fog, so I might not be especially eloquent today, but we're going to power through it. I'm going to echo John's last choice. That is actually my number 3, Get Up With It. I have really recently fallen in love with that album, and in particular, the opening track, He Loved Him Madly. That is just such a journey. It's unlike anything else. The first time I heard it, I thought, am I seriously listening to Miles Davis here? Or did I put the wrong album on? Nope, that was Miles. And it was a journey. It was a trip. It's just a perfect album to sit back and close your eyes and lay in the darkness until the more up-tempo tunes come in later, and then it's a bit of a jolt, but it's a good jolt. I'm going to go with In a Silent Way as my number 2. It was actually the second Miles album I ever bought after the obligatory Kind of Blue. In a Silent Way is just generally so peaceful, and Joe Zawinul's writing on there is particularly helpful. So I was listening to it earlier, and my wife said, "Are you playing jazz right now?" Yeah, I tried to put one on that doesn't have a whole lot of squawking horns on it. So okay. Figured In a Silent Way was good for that. But my number 1, I think at this moment, I'm going to have to echo Davy's commentary regarding Miles and Gil and what a wonderful pair they were. But I'm going to go with Sketches of Spain as my number 1. It's just a thing of beauty. It's I've heard different people say that Miles is essentially just adding color on top of Gil's music. Even so, what color it is, it's gorgeous. It's otherworldly. I love it. All that said, Miles was my gateway drug into jazz, like so many people from the rock world, I would say. I think that's pretty common, but I got to say, Duke's the big daddy now. Sorry, Miles, but I still love Miles, but Duke's the man. I think Miles himself would have even said that.
Oh yeah.
He would have.
Mm-hmm. He would have probably
Awesome.
moaned about it, but yeah, he would have agreed eventually. He wouldn't have smiled.
All right. Well, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. It was awesome. Did you want to tell the people at home anything about yourself before we get into honorable mentions and a little group discussion, or?
I did want to show off this little collectible here.
Nice.
Actually bought this originally because of the box. I saw that and I said, "You've got to be kidding me." But the actual beer itself was quite wonderful too.
All right, awesome. Well, we got plenty of time left to do some honorable mentions, and maybe we can get sort of a more free-flowing group discussion going. So let's we'll go around once more for let's say 2 honorable mentions, and then we'll see if we can get a group discussion going just on the topic of miles in general. So Ryan, do you have any honorable mentions you'd like to throw out?
I do. I had 3, but a few people already mentioned Jack Johnson, so I'm not going to talk about it again. So for my first one, I wanted to go with Felicity Kilimanjaro from '69, I believe this was. Now this is the transition album here, along with In a Silent Way, where you hear him starting to go from traditional jazz to more fusion. This just has such an amazing atmosphere on it. You have that amazing quintet of Miles Davis, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams on here. And like I said, just such a great atmosphere. This is an awesome album to chill out to. It gets a little bit experimental at times, but still a pretty mellow album in comparison to what was going to come in the future. The next one that I wanted to show off, it's not a traditional album, it's actually a compilation, but I always really loved it. We were talking about John McLaughlin during Bitches Brew and On the Corner and stuff. His playing on this album, Big Fun, is out of this world. This compilation came out in '74. It's only 4 tracks: Great Expectations, Ith, Go Ahead John, and Lonely Fire. Just amazing stuff that didn't make it on to albums like Bitches Brew and On the Corner. I think it's recordings from between like 68 and 72, I'm pretty sure, just different sessions. Like I said, you have Miles on your Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Ron Carter, Steve Grossman, Billy Cobbin, John McLaughlin, etc. Just tons of great musicians on here, and it's just a cool little thing of sessions that didn't make it on the albums. Just one of the better compilations I've heard, because I don't really buy a whole lot of them.
Awesome. All right. Well, Rand, honorable mentions.
Oh yeah, when I mentioned before about how the first time I heard Miles Davis, remember I said in that context, this was the first time I heard Miles Davis. And this was my mother's album, and she'd gotten it from the Columbia Record Company. This is the original 1963 mono pressing. It says High Fidelity on the bottom there. But I didn't know who this guy was. I used to just play her records like when she was at work. And she passed away 4 years and 2 days ago. So when she did that, left us, I ended up inheriting her record collection. She didn't have much of it, but this one's kind of special to me in this sentimental way. It's really nice music. It's way different than what we've all been talking about. This, I don't know if you guys have heard that. I mean,
Yeah. I own it. It's a very good album.
It's not much mentioned, but it's a really pretty thing. And I didn't realize it, but Herbie Hancock's playing piano on this. This is probably the first time I ever heard him in my life without knowing who he was. And then my other honorable mention is this.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Fantastic live album.
I just wanted to show I had a fat boy. This is Agartha. And it says, like on side 2, it says theme from Jack Johnson, previously released as PG 33967. But I looked at the thing on this and I don't think it's the same thing. But I don't know. But anyways, yeah, this is Maisha was mentioned before, and it's the number 2 track on here. Prelude is 32 minutes. I mean, who does that? You know, usually with a prelude, it's about yay big. Interlude, another one, 26 minutes. I mean, this thing is just 4 songs. It's just it didn't make my top 3, but I do love it. That's my Miles Davis collection. That's all I've got. And first time I seen him live was on the Isle of Wight VHS video that I bought, and he didn't have a guitar player, and he did a piece called "Call It Anything." And I know they just made the whole thing up. They were right there, just inventing Tal from scratch, because that's never been played again.
Awesome.
I don't think, but he's got like 535 albums. So. I know. I mean, on Amazon, I was on Amazon one time just trying to find out when the list would end, and I gave up because I didn't have 20 extra minutes at the time. It just kept going. So many records.
Yeah, I mean, it's a decade-spanning career, right? And very
Yeah,
productive.
I've only scratched the top of the iceberg. I'm missing out on a lot of things. Ryan and you guys have mentioned so many albums I've never even heard. I've never heard Big Fun. I've never heard Get Up With It. I haven't even heard On the Corner yet. I should, because I'm often nut.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's the whole point of these sort of discussions, right? We're all trying to just find some new music to listen to, or maybe some old music that we hadn't heard before.
Yeah.
Well, I like
Davy.
Duren.
Yeah. Davy, honorable mentions from you?
Yeah, so again, so many of the massive hitters have just been one that always stands out for me is, how is this so good when it shouldn't be? Because it's essentially a compilation of outtakes from when he retired, as Water Babies, from the Nefertiti sessions, essentially. And Columbia put it out when Miles wasn't giving them any new products. And it's just more of the same. Sounds like Damning It with Faint Praise, but actually it takes it in some different directions. So just like I said that a lot of the sessions were stitched together, here it's like you're seeing them stitched together in a different tapestry, which is quite an unusual way of seeing it, and with a 1970s perspective rather than 1960s perspective. And then to go much further back, way back to the early 60s, the only album he did with Hank Mobley, Someday My Prince Will Come, is one of his most romantic and more classically beautiful albums. I think it's just, there you go, just a stunning, gorgeous piece that's one you could stick on of an evening, and in a more amorous mood, rather, there's certain occasions you don't want to stick Jack Johnson on, you know what I mean? But yeah, Someday My Prince Will Come hits the right spot. Well, I won't make a comment after that. But also the concert that I referenced with Quincy, I forgot to say, is also out on Blu-ray and DVD if anybody wants to see the visuals of it. So if anybody wants to check that out. And there's a million Miles live albums, Miles in Tokyo, Miles in Europe, Miles at Carnegie Hall. You can't go wrong. And because it's Miles, there's so many reviews, you won't go wrong if you just have a quick read. You'll find 1.5 billion. It's the ultimate one of those what do you call those diagrams, like thought things, where you follow a line and then you can go to this, then go to this leads to this, this leads to this, and it will never end. You'll go to the side musicians, you'll go to their side musicians. Yeah, I did some weird name, I can't remember. So you just keep going and going and going. The side musicians become legends in their own right, as was said with Train. Tone Poet this week announced that Blue Train's getting an analog master from the original tapes for the first time on vinyl, which is exciting. You do it with Cannonball, you can do it with Sonny Sharrock. I mean, just Miles is the gift that literally keeps on giving. You'll just, Hank Mobley there, you will just never ever run out of stuff with Miles Davis. So the honorable mention for me ultimately is Miles Davis, because it's all there. Jazz is all that. You can find a way to absolutely everybody in jazz from Miles Davis. He's the Kevin Bacon of jazz, the 6 degrees of Miles.
Awesome. All right, John, honorable mentions.
Well, Dave just put it perfectly as usual. I mean, so many of these guys played with Miles, became legends in their own right. We can do a show for an hour just on Herbie Hancock alone. I
Mhm.
mean, because while they were making all these, the second great quintet was making all these great albums with Miles, they were making these same albums with Herbie Hancock. They were making Maiden Voyage, Imperial Isle, Speak Like a Child. The list goes on and on. Getting back to Miles, though, oh, you can go anything with the second great quintet. ESP's wonderful, Sorcerers, very good. You Davy was talking about some Amorous albums. My Funny Valentine's, another great Amorous album by Miles. Even if you want to go 80s, by that point, he was going in a different direction. He was trying to sound a little more modern. Tutu's a pretty good album from the 80s.
Yeah, it is.
It's
Yeah.
different. I mean, it's different, but because by this point, Marcus Miller is writing the songs and doing production.
Love Marcus.
Yeah, Marcus is awesome. Yeah, there's the thing with Miles, like as Dave said, he is the gift that keeps on giving. You can just listen to him for decades and find something new. But there is one live album that I will recommend to anyone. This is one of the heaviest albums you'll ever hear. This is Miles Davis live at the Fillmore East, March 7, 1970. This was right after Bitches Brew came out.
Yeah.
Shit. This is insane. These two shows, he opened one show for Neil Young and Crazy Horse, and one show for Steve Miller Band when Steve Miller was doing blues.
Yeah.
And this is insane. Some of these songs he's playing on here that were recorded on Jack Johnson, he's doing them in double time. Yes. Fantastic album. I mean, just buy it if you can find it. This is some of the most intense music, period. You don't need a guitar to play heavy music. This is insane. I highly recommend this to anyone who likes jazz. I mean, here's the thing with Miles. You don't want to start here. You want to start, with Kind of Blue, something like Kind of Blue, Miles Ahead, even in a silent way. But In a Silent Way's quiet. There's songs on here from In the Silent Way that they just turn inside out. Insane. That's all I got.
Awesome. I like it. That is a hell of an honorable mention. Bill, honorable mentions from you.
All right. I went through my three favorites and none of them featured this lineup, which is my favorite lineup of the band, actually, strangely enough. Pretty much every one of these beauties. You got Wayne Shorter on there. I'm good to go. That is, I believe, the best one he ever had.
Yeah, it's great.
And you guys are talking about essentially the Miles family tree and all these different musicians. And yeah, I've been doing that a lot with Wayne lately and with Herbie. And yeah, it's pretty cool to go down these different roads with these same musicians. But it's amazing to think that while they were best known for what was going on as being part of this quintet at the time, most likely, that they were making equally good albums outside of the quintet. It's just ridiculous, the amount of material, especially Wayne Shorter as a writer, how much he was coming up with in the 60s. He kind of brought his own little special magic. And the man's still going. I don't know if he's it's been a little while since he's released anything, but I'm hopeful he's got one more in him.
Me too.
Um,
And then I'm sorry, Bill. And then after he left the quintet, him and Joe Zawinul formed Weather Report.
Weather Report, yeah.
Weather Report, same. There's another show we can do an hour on.
Yeah.
Easy. Weather Report are amazing.
And we've not even mentioned things like Birth of the Cool, for goodness sake. I mean, doesn't it just show you how massively amazing this catalogue is? Where you can do, everybody does a picks and some honorables, and you don't do Birth of the Cool. You know,
How about, I got an idea. How about all the bands, the fusion bands that Miles Davis spawned?
Yeah.
yeah. I
Wild
mean, it's a
Digital
good.
Orchestra, Return to Forever, Weather Report, Tony
It's
Williams
good.
Lifetime. I mean,
It's a cool idea, but I also like that we've not pigeonholed him into just being the fusion guy, because that was my mistake for too long. And then I grew to appreciate the earlier stuff.
well, it
and
could be
then-
part one.
Let's do it in your channel then, Rand, instead of telling them to tell.
I told you. I'm not gonna.
He's putting in orders, folks.
I found out I'm no good at this, so I just would rather join other people's shows. I tried to run my own, and I can't do it. I don't have the,
You're fine, son. Don't
I
worry.
don't have the personality for
I wouldn't change you for the world.
it. Thanks. Neither you. But I was just saying, it's amazing the bands that came out of his
Yeah.
stuff. Just Bitches Brew alone. I mean, just look at that lineup, and look what happened after that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I will say
And on here, for example, it's got interviews with Jean-Luc Ponty, Aldo Meola, and Stanley Clarke, just gushing about spending time with Miles. You know, with like just everybody who's everybody in jazz worked with Miles, played with Miles, knew Miles, and that's what's kind of funny about his reputation as being a real. I don't like swearing on this channel. I think it's the Canadian aspect. It makes me think, you know, I should be more polite. I think he was a bit of a rude fellow. There we go. That's a nice British way of saying it. When actually he was really loyal to his own band members and things. He just did not like being played for a fool, and he had been taken to the cleaners by labels and promoters so many times. He had that gruff exterior, but you know, when you hear the guys talking about him and what it was like, yeah, it was a bit tough in the studio sometimes, but it was all for the music. And if you were living up to what, a bit like James Brown, if you were giving him what he could hear in the ether, you were staying. You know. But if you wanted to move on, sorry guys.
Yeah, I
Can
will
you?
say that.
I'm sorry.
I will say with Miles, I mean, he really got me started with looking at the liner notes on jazz albums, because it's like I listen to one of those albums, see who's playing on there. What can I find that has all those guys on those albums and different bands? It was the same for me with Coltrane's Impulse lineup, because before I knew it, I was buying every jazz album that had Elvin Jones on it because of those Coltrane albums. It was just a whole vicious cycle of looking at those liner notes and be like, all right, I'm going to listen to that now because this player's on this and I heard him on this album. And it's like, that's one of the amazing things with jazz. And then, you know, other genres like krautrock, they all overlapped and stuff, all those musicians and stuff. It's a fun little thing to do.
Yeah.
Bill, can you show your Miles in the Sky album again? You have Miles in the Sky there, right? I thought you brought it up. There you go. Okay, I got a trivia question for all you guys. This was the first Miles album that had an electric guitar player on it. Who was the player? Wound up having a great R&B career after. Randall probably got it now.
Great R&B career. George Benson.
Yes, George Benson. Before he went R&B, he was a wicked guitar. He was a wicked jazz guitarist. Well, I don't know if he's still
you don't need to praise me for getting that right so quickly, but you know, whatever, that's fine.
It's interesting that the footage that they came out back in those days always doesn't have a guitar player. I mean, like Isle of Wight, no guitar player. The footage, I don't know what the other one was, but maybe what you just mentioned, no guitar player. I mean, what do you think that's all about? Is there any footage of John McLaughlin or Pete Cosey or Reg Lucas or whatever?
I'm not sure of like if there's footage of that. I mean, you know, like I know the albums like you do, Rand, but I'm not sure if the footage is out there. I honestly, I never really checked out YouTube or anything to see if it's out there.
I know things like the Isle of Wight Festival 70 was all shot by Dave Pennebaker, and a lot of it tended to be focused on whoever the front person was, and a lot of the acts, including even like the Doors and things and Hendrix, didn't show the full band very much. So
was Herbie Hancock on electric piano?
For the Isle of Wight?
Yeah. crazy. I've watched that so many times. He's nuts.
Yeah, and Herbie Hancock. I mean, there's something he could do a completely different series about, you know,
Yeah.
Oh my
which
gosh,
wouldn't
yeah.
even as if he hadn't even met Miles. You could do a completely different career almost. But yeah,
I like
what
Thrust. I think
what a
Thrust
family
is
tree!
awesome.
What a family tree!
Thrust is fantastic. Oh my God. That might be my either that or Headhunters.
Yeah.
I don't really know Headhunters that well, but Thrust.
Oh, that's Headhunters is one of those like Love Supreme or something where it's the album for a reason. You know, it's oh.
I really like Sextant.
Sextant is
Sextant's
amazing.
great.
That's
Yeah.
so good.
That's like music from outer space. It's
It
wonderful.
is.
Yeah,
It
those
is.
two.
Album,
I don't think I've
Oh,
heard
yeah.
Sextant, but I do need to listen to that one.
Sextant's
amazing.
insane.
And
It's
I
my
heard Maiden
favorite Herbie
Voyage.
album.
I heard Maiden Voyage after I got out of the Air Force in Sacramento. Somebody played me the original. Like that tune just blew my head off. I just couldn't believe how advanced it sounded. Maiden Voyage just seemed like he was going into a different world. I love that.
Mhm.
And he was very similar to Miles in the fact that he just kept stretching and searching.
Yep.
Restless. These restless musicians who have these long careers where they go in all these different directions. It's like a gift. You can just keep listening to these albums for decades and find something new.
Yeah.
What about Manchild? Do you like that one?
Manchild's very good too. That was
Yeah.
Get Up Your Get Ups, I think, or Hang Up Your Hang Ups. That was the opener. That's very good too. 76.
Yeah, he had some really cool looking album covers too, like Sextant, Manchild. Those are really attractive album covers.
And he went really avant-garde there for a little while before he went more into that funk thing. I mean, with Crossings. I mean, that's an album that's really out there.
Mhm.
Then
Yeah,
he
I don't
went
think
like,
I've heard that one.
Crossings is like one of those 3 tracks, 45-minute albums. I mean, it's like Sextant, but not quite as funky. Herbie Hancock. I was blessed to see him 3 years ago.
We know they played. I don't mean to interrupt you. But they played Chameleon on the radio, FM radio in Sacramento, and right as it was coming out, it was on FM. I mean, you know,
It was.
You wouldn't hear that today. They wouldn't play that.
That was like a near hit single in 73 or 74.
Yeah, it was real hit, you know.
It was, and at that point, Miles was actually opening for Herbie, because what happened was Chameleon got Herbie on the radio, and all of a sudden he's having gold albums, and while Miles is still making these great restless albums, they're not charting very high at all.
Yeah.
So he actually wound up opening for Herbie for a little while.
Wow.
It's something that a lot of great artists have in common, though, isn't it? That they do change their sounds, they do change their bands, and often are criticized massively when they do so. And then it's only afterwards they're kind of reappraised. You know,
Yes.
going all the way back to like classical, like Bizet and things. When he debuted Carmen, it was booed off stage. And you know, we're going to be covering the Dylan series, obviously, when he went electric at Newport. When a great artist changes entirely, they're met with resistance, and then time proves them right. It's a kind of fascinating. Stravinsky, yeah.
Yeah, even when he did the Firebird, didn't the same thing happen then too?
Yes, yep. But
what about the Rite of Spring? I mean, my God, that music today. If I listen to Rite of Spring and with an open mind and my eyes
I love that we're
closed,
now doing a Stravinsky.
I would think it would be written 10 years later. I mean, it's unbelievable.
But no, it just goes to show the restless artists might not be appreciated for exactly what they're doing there and then. Although a lot of these were, but once the legacy takes hold, time does its thing, and you know, all of a sudden you're digging around trying to find some obscure Oscar Peterson LP or something. You know, it's just that's your life all of a sudden, and you wouldn't change it for anything.
If you're a musician, how many people here play? I know Ryan does.
I don't play anymore, but I used to be a bass player, and I've dabbled in piano as well.
if you really break down music of what it really is, there's only 12 notes.
Right.
So everybody else is just taking those 12 notes and doing what they wanted to do with them. It's phenomenal when you think about it in a universal thought of it. I mean, the sky is endless. I mean, you just could go forever.
And if you listen to Status Quo, there's only 3 chords. So, you know.
Mhm.
No, but you're right.
However,
Well,
Awesome.
Bitches Brew, for if you want to talk about just one chord, I mean, the
Yeah.
first song on Bitches Brew is in the key of C minor. I mean, it never changes. There's no. It's just amazing. It's just constantly pulsing, pushing. Check it out. I did a recording back in like 2000 on my studio where I had my headphone on and I took off one ear so I could hear what is the drummer on that Tony Williams?
what year is it?
Bitches Brew, first cut.
I believe he played on. I believe he was on that.
That's
But
Tony Williams.
Jack John.
Well, anyways, so I'm playing my portable
Yeah.
drum set that I bought at Costco to him, listening to it in one ear and recording it, and then listening to what I'm doing, trying to go with them for the whole thing. And I did do that, and it's on my digital studio. But
There you
yeah,
go, Rand. If you were
It's
just a little
amazing.
bit older, you could have been on stage at the Fillmore with them.
it's like having a metronome, right? Because you want to be able to keep steady time. That's a good way to do it, I think. But yeah, you don't need to change chords. I mean, Miles proved it. You could just do 30 minutes of C.
No, it's like I said. That's what Gil Evans said to him. I'm not going to give you chords. I'll give you the orchestration. You take care of the rest. I'm going to chart any of that stuff.
Some of the interviews I've heard with John
Worked quite
McLaughlin
well.
talking about joining that band is phenomenal. He just said he gave me all kinds of freedom. He said, just play this, just play what you want, just do anything you like.
And then even if you're talking about guitarists there with John McLaughlin, if you listen to Felicity Kilimanjaro, which
I've never heard that.
If you listen to Mademoiselle Mabry, that's the theme from "The Wind Cries Mary" by Hendrix.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's that was like a shout out to Hendrix with that. So Miles was paying attention to what was out there. He was seeing what was out there and trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, there were rumors that Jimi wanted to join Miles and they wanted to do something together. But
Yeah. Well, he did play with Prince. He played live with Prince. That'll do.
Miles did?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, 87.
Shoot.
He's on Sign of the Times.
Prince was phenomenal.
I never bought Sign of the Times.
Have you guys
Oh,
heard
thank you.
Have you guys heard the Jimi Hendrix John McLaughlin bootleg jam?
No, I don't think so.
Seek it out. It's on YouTube. It's phenomenal. You have to listen to that. They go crazy. Just done it at some bar or something or a studio. I don't know. But anyways, they just did it and they recorded it. It's really
Studio.
Hey Nick,
Ernie
you want
Grumman Studios, the local
Here you
pub.
go.
They just had a lot of drinks at the
Yeah.
studio. That's the
To be, yeah. It started out as a studio. I'm not sure it was by the end.
30-minute version of Rainy Day Dream Away.
Okay,
All
Nick,
right,
let's add
well,
some structure to our day.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think we're
We've gone a
coming
bit
to the end of our
freeform.
time, but is in honor of the the experimental nature
Yes.
of the discussion, we'll say.
The
All
People will
right.
Europeans
appreciate it in 50 years, don't worry, it'll
The
be.
Europeans should call him Kilometer Davis.
That's
Who's
what we'll
Miles?
end off then.
Look at Ryan.
Who's
I got
Miles?
Ryan. I got Ryan.
That's funny.
No, you cringed, Ryan. You didn't get
Ryan
it.
knows me so well. We've done so many videos. You should see our saucer rock stuff.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff.
I ain't done either. There's more. There's more coming.
Well, we'll look
Don't threaten
forward to it. I think we're coming to the end of our time, but guys, this was great. We got our
Thank you.
Miles Davis discussion in. We got some extra bonus recommendations as well, and some deep dive in the discussion there. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I'm talking about our panelists, and of course, I'm talking about you at home. So thanks for watching. There's the whole like, subscribe, share stuff that you've heard a million times before. So we'll just skip it and say thanks for being here. We really appreciate it, and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Nick.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks,
Love
guys.
you.